I am so glad that's recorded because I'm going to have my kids sit down on Friday night with some popcorn, and we're going to see that. So thank you, Rob. Before I get started, I'm going to talk to you guys about districts, and there's a story that I'm going to tell you, but before we start to talk about this story, we've got to talk about what we have done over the last 20 years. So Rob's given you an overview with it, Lucille started to talk to you about it, but we also need to know what we've done, what we need to keep doing, what's next on the agenda, and what does this mean for you out there? Because a lot of you are coming from different areas. You're the classroom teacher, you might be the principal, you might be working at the district level, you're working at the state level, maybe you're a family member and you want to find out more how you can get this into your child's school. But all of us are impacted and we all have a piece of the puzzle. So I want to talk to you about what we've done the last 20 years as we get ready to kick off 21 years. And one of the big things is implementation networks. So the Association for Positive Behavior Support, that's the international conference that typically happens in February or March of each year. We're going to be in Washington, D.C. But where you see these little marks around the world are established networks around the science of positive behavior support. Some are regional, some are state, some are specific, thematic, domestic, but we've got them all over the country. And what's cool about that is that means there's that much of an interest in how we're impacting the lives of individuals, how we're impacting systems. Not every single network is specific around an educational setting, because some might be specific around family, community settings, but we've got involvement everywhere. And so in some place we're trying to see how can we get down in South America? How can we get in other parts, in other continents? We've got the Pbis Europe network. Is there anyone here from that? The Netherlands, right here. It's a small country and there's a small group of chairs representing them, right? But that network in and of itself has over 15 countries part of that network. So we're starting to bridge this together. So it's no longer what we're doing in the United States, in our different states. We can learn from what other folks are doing and how they're adapting PBIS to fit their culture. So we've got the international network, the website there, and just know there's over 2,000 or about 2,000 members that we've got, and there's lots of skill building webinars. But the reason I'm talking to you about this is not just because I'm past president and have sworn for life and have the tattoo that I will always promote APBS, but the reason for it is that we've got so many board members that happen to be PBIS partners from the National Center. We've got lots of previous board members who have been part of the National PBIS Center. We've got lots of you guys out there in the fields that are part of the work groups and doing the work out there. So it's a great way to continue to build our knowledge. So Rob talked to you about over 26,000 schools that we've got. Now we're going to come back to the United States. We've got over 26,000 schools, and schools report their data into the national database. So, again, very small font. What's your guess as the biggest row? Or the biggest column? What's your guess on that? It's not Rhode Island. No offense, Rhode Island, okay? The biggest one is California. And people would go, all right, California. So we have 2 states with at least 1,500 schools or more that are reporting data into the national database. I'm proud to say Florida's number 2. But we're going to catch you, California, one of these days, but at some point we're going to top out. You are a bigger state. And Texas, I got to challenge you. You are the biggest state. You need to be moving, okay? All right, let's look at, we've got 8 states that are reporting over 1,000 schools that are implementing PBIS. And across the country, we have 22 states. So think about that. 22 states now have 500 or more schools that they're reporting PBIS across the country. We didn't have that 20 years ago. That's awesome. Okay? That's not just us celebrating as the TA Center. This is you guys doing the work out there. And this is that part we're so interconnected. So give yourselves a hand on that, all right? So we have state PBIS projects. There's almost 30 state PBIS projects that I could find websites that are all over. We've got some projects that actually have George Sagai on their homepage. I won't give any names, Delaware, but I'm curious, do you have more unique and returning visitors than other states because you have George's picture? So that I think would be a good little thesis project. We've got states that actually post a lot of pictures of their project having fun while they're working. Again, won't say names, Nevada, but it's pretty darn cool. We've got some states, Tennessee, that have 3 projects for their state because they regionalize how they're providing their supports. We didn't have any of this 20 years ago. You guys have built this. This is pretty darn cool. So celebrate. If you guys are state folks, raise your hands. Yes, awesome job, you guys. All right. And if you don't see yours up there, you need to let us know, because that means I couldn't find it. All right, PBIS State Leaders Network. How many of you were at this meeting in Denver in August? If you were, stand up, because not everybody's going to be able to see you, and I can't see you that well. Give these folks a hand. These folks were willing to come to Colorado in August for 2 days. I know it's a rough spot to go in the summer, but we got in a room, we closed all of the shades on all the windows, and they worked nonstop for those 2 days to start to continue to build the collaboration and network so that they can problem solve, learn from each other's states, talk about the issues that they're having in their states, but then start to learn from other folks and see how they can best support each other. We've got states that are starting to regionalize their supports, because there's times when our funding gets a little bleak. And we've got great resources of folks. Why do we have to reinvent the wheel? So this is a fantastic demonstration of the state leaders. We had over 38 states represented at this meeting this past August. That's phenomenal. So great job, you guys. All right, another thing that we need to be really proud about, what we've established the last 20 years, is this implementation framework. And here are 2 of the main, probably biggest used graphics that we've got with the center. The ones that Lucille joked around of the tattoos that we have. But when we're talking about a multi-tiered framework, it's not just about the kids who are moving up and down the continuum of supports and how we're addressing them. It's about how we're supporting the classrooms, how we're supporting the teachers. You as a district level, how are you supporting your schools? Because you know you've got schools across the continuum, and that helps you organize your resources. But then we also know that we've got some schools that need some additional support, and we may consider that the most intensive, where you've got to allocate your resources. So nobody's exempt. Okay, sometimes for us, for the TA Center, we may have states that fall throughout the continuum. What are we providing for all? But some of our states may need additional support at times based on whatever might be happening politically. So just know that nobody's exempt. Our families fall throughout this continuum, but we've got to continue to know that we've got to use our data to determine what are we doing with our practices, what are we doing with our systems, what kind of outcomes does that produce. And those are the changes that we can make, and we use our data to see, are we making a difference? Because the key is, if we are not making a difference, then why are we doing it? All right, let's talk about some of the resources. So how many of you have gone to the pbis.org website? All right, be prepared, that's going to be changing. So we are planning to update that website. Okay, we know that there's a ton of resources on there. We actually get 165,000 unique visitors a month on that. I think it's a month, or is it a week? It's a lot, that's all I can say. We also have the Pbis Apps. How many of you use that? That's the free online. Yes, it's a great system where you can enter your outcome data, your fidelity data. You can be able to get meaningful graphs in this process. That's a great opportunity for folks. We also have several evaluation measures. Rob talked to you a little bit about that. Again, we need to be able to know what we're doing. Are we doing it correctly? And is it going to give us the impact that we want? I joked years ago that Rob would put us in a closet and wouldn't let us go until we came out with this tool. And he would say, "You weren't in a closet." And I'd say, "Yeah, but there weren't any windows." I'd be in there for a couple of days, and we would come up with whatever was a good idea for a tool. But you know what? Then we needed you guys to field test it. We needed your feedback to say, does this make sense, these items? Can we use it on your schools and your districts? Is this going to make a difference? Because before it gets fully put up on the website, we need to make sure it's research validated. We need to make sure it's measuring what we want it to measure. And so there's lots of opportunities for measurement that are available. So I've got all of the website links on there, and I just realized hopefully that won't change much as we're updating the website. We've also got a lot of state evaluation reports. Again, we only get these based on what the states send to us so that we can post up there, but there's lots of great examples of states that have pulled their data together on an annual basis and put it in a nice presentation format that can be easily disseminated for folks to understand. So kudos to you guys for developing that. And then we've got our forum that Lucille set you guys up so nicely about. And we do pretty much get into a closet in February, usually, the group of us in Denver, and we start to plan that next upcoming forum. And so these are the various strands that we've got, but what's important to know is for you to look at. It's everything from those folks that are just starting out with PBIS to those folks that have been implementing for a long time. So there's a lot of great information. We've got blueprints. How many of you have used a blueprint before from the TA Center? Great. So these are also going to be updated. Oops. Well, I don't know how to go back, but the blueprints are cool. So, all right, we've also got lots of material about how to address disproportionality and increasing equity. And if you haven't had a chance to see them, I recommend that you go there. And again, I'm only highlighting some of the resources that we have. But we've even looked at working with the pyramid model folks, addressing disproportionality in the early childhood setting. So we've expanded the range of audiences and how we're impacting and who we're impacting. Talked about classrooms. Remember, the #1 predictor for sustainability is if we're moving PBIS in the classrooms. PBIS is just not about getting stuff in the hallway or getting it in the cafeteria. We've got to make sure that when we're teaching in the classroom, because that's where a majority of the time the kids should be. So we've got a lot of great practice briefs, technical briefs, dealing specific with the practices, dealing specific with the systems to set up for classroom practices, as well as the data that you would use within the classrooms. Climate. How many of you have heard that as a big term? Yes. We do have a lot of tools on there in climate. We even have some measurement tools that are available on Pbis Apps around climate, but there's a lot of great information that's available, and there's going to be even more coming over the next 5 years. We've also got some content too. Okay, so the part that I want you to know is that there's a lot of great information up there for you, and it's all free. Okay, because just because it costs something doesn't mean it's better. All right, so the other thing I want you to think about is that there's times our districts commit and invest in certain types of curricula that might be great evidence-based curricula, but if it's not founded and embedded within the PBIS framework or a multi-tiered framework, it's not going to work as effectively and efficiently as you'd like it. So why would you invest all those dollars and not set it up to be able to be successful? So we've got to remember that too. All right, so we've also expanded the range of folks that, like I said, that we've been working on, and we've got a new monograph that's available for the high schools. Okay, researchers from and practitioners from the National TA Center are working with you guys out in the field across the country with high schools, which helped develop this content that's in here. So this is just newly posted probably in the last couple of weeks. We're looking at having more effective and efficient team meetings through the TIPS model. There's a lot of great information up there on that, as well as how do we prevent duplicating our efforts for alignment and integration. But then we know we've got lots of issues with mental health for all of our, whether it's students, whether it's our teachers, our faculty, whether it's our families that are coming to our school settings. So we know schools cannot do everything. Okay, so if you're being told you have to do everything, it's okay. You can go back and say, Heather George said I don't have to do everything. But what we need to do, where we're coming from, whether it's the state level, whether it's the district level to support your schools, or whether it's your schools to support your teachers, you've got to be equipped with some basic skills and knowledge in how to identify the kids that are not responding well. And how can we get them the supports they need and help to improve that so it doesn't get worse. We've got a great ebook on there in family engagement. We've also got information on what to do, how to expand the Pbis framework in alternative settings. So lots of cool resources, and I'm just highlighting some of them now. I also did a search to say how many graduate certificates are there out there in the United States related to Pbis, okay? And I actually found 11 pretty quickly. We did not have this. We did not have this 20 years ago. We did not have this 10 years ago. There may have been one or two at best 10 years ago. So the fact is there is quality training that's available. Majority of these are all online too, so it doesn't mean it has to be within your state. There's opportunities to get deeper into the content and to understand how you have better implementation effects. But it always goes back to, and I don't know, it's a little fuzzy right now. How many of you have done this? I had a feeling. Yeah, I was looking at my bookshelves the other day and I thought, yep, there's a lot of binders on there with a lot of dust on them. So what good is it going to a training if you're not actually going to do something with the information? So let's go back to that graph that I showed you about the 26,000 schools that we've got. We have the schools that are reporting, yes, we're implementing. But not everybody who's implementing always completes the fidelity measure or submits that data to us. So the green bar indicates the number of schools that are actually saying, yes, we are implementing Pbis. The orange bar tops it off to say there's the number in this state that are reporting fidelity data to us. And then the blue bar actually shows of the numbers reported from that state, this is the group, the number that are implementing with fidelity. And that's the piece, if you're a state level person, you want to look at, are we making an impact? And so why am I telling this for somebody who's from a classroom teacher? Because you need to know what you're implementing at your local level is having an impact of what's being reported at the district, that gets reported to the state, that ends up on something like this. It impacts everybody, which leads to, we have a strong evidence base. It's no longer just a good idea. We've got tons of research now to show over the last 20 years there's improved student outcomes in academic performance, social emotional competence, social academic outcomes for students with disabilities, reduced bullying behaviors, and decreased rates of student-reported drug and alcohol abuse. We also have shown that we've reduced exclusionary discipline. So we've reduced the office discipline referrals, suspensions, restraints, and seclusion. But we also have been able to demonstrate there's improved teacher outcomes. Imagine that. We haven't gotten improved teacher pay yet, but that's the next 5 years, right? But the perception of teacher efficacy, the school organizational health and school climate, and the perception of school safety overall, all because of implementing school-wide Pbis and the research that's happening out there. So, what's next? Drop the mic and we're out, right? We're done. Grab your box lunch and we go play in Chicago. No, we've got a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of work to do. There's over 26 schools that are implementing Pbis. We need to figure out a way to best sustain them because that was a lot of work that you guys engaged in, whether you're at that local level getting trained and making those systems change efforts at your school or you were the person doing the training. So we've got to look at how do we expand into different settings. So going into our rural areas, going into urban or suburban. We've got to look at how we're going to implement better, integrate, and align a range of our evidence-based practices in order to support all. And when I say all, it's not just the schools, but it's also districts, it's also states, but we're talking about all kids too. It's not just the kids that decide they want to follow the expectations. We're talking about all kids that are coming to school. We also need to look at examining more of these critical issues that schools are being faced with around school violence, illegal use of drugs, and disproportionality. But I want you to make sure to always continue to adhere to that multi-tiered framework. Because it doesn't mean you as a teacher or you as a district person has to get specifically totally fluent in the content on dealing with substance abuse. But it means that you need to get fluent in the multi-tiered framework, and how are you providing that training to get folks the access that they need so we can get them those supports so that they can be successful in the school setting. We've got to look at improving our behavior supports at advanced tiers. So how many of you are implementing Tier 1 right now? Raise your hand. All right. How many of you like implementing Tier 1? All right, now how many of you have moved into Tier 2 or Tier 3? All right, and there's not as many hands that go up. There's a lot of hands, great job with that. I want you to know there's more beyond Tier 1. And Tier 1 can be a lot of work getting that foundational systems in place. But if we stop there, we can't get too comfortable because there's still more kids that need supports. And when we talk about all means all. When you're truly implementing school-wide, you mean you are addressing the supports and needs of all kids. So we also need to look at how we're going to improve the social and academic of students with disabilities, enhancing school climate and school safety, as well as improving the conditions for learning to promote the well-being of all. And we say of all students, but I'd like to also say the well-being of all educators too. Because again, all means all. We're not just talking about the kiddos, we're also talking about everybody who interacts with the kiddos. So what does this mean to you? This is a map of the United States. You knew that, right? It also includes our U.S. territories. So, our folks from Puerto Rico and USVI, are you in here? Awesome. Welcome. I also want to make sure that it's clear to you that Alaska, Guam, and Hawaii are really not south of California or Texas. And I will admit, I don't exactly know where the Northern Mariana Islands are, but I'm quite certain they're not south of Louisiana. But this was something I could find. It's all on one page there. But when we're talking about the National Technical Assistance Center, it is supporting the entire United States as well as the U.S. territories, and we have got a lot of activity in Guam, we've got activity in Hawaii, as well as Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, I know for sure. So let me talk to you about Florida. So Florida was that state where my picture was taking up the entire state that Rob was showing you, which that picture was of me when I was pregnant, and my kids were like, Mom, you gotta get a new picture. And I loved it when Rob put that picture. I'm like, wow, I'm taking up the whole state. Yep, I felt that big. So, but Florida, yes, it's this sandbar that sticks out. And I want to talk to you about what we've learned. Oh my gosh. Oh, hadn't had that happen before. All right. I want to talk about what we've learned in Florida, okay? So what overall, all of you have some type of state project. And if you don't have some type of state project, it's okay. You can jump into this continuum where you are at the district or where you are at the school. But the whole purpose of this graph is to show you we're interconnected, that we're continuing to coach and support each other. So what may come down from a state and types of supports, those folks are coaching district folks because those district folks are essentially coaching their local schools. And we maybe coincide together, coaching continually together, but essentially your classroom teachers then are coaching your students. And you can see how it's all related. But the key that we want to be focusing on, I'm going to focus on today, is that LEA. So that LEA or district, we know, here's the other graph that you may have a tattoo on. There's a leadership team. Okay, this is not just specific for districts. This is also specific for states, but this also can work for schools too. All right? But there is a leadership team that have two different types of functions, and there may be some different folks with this. But there's executive functions. These folks tend to have a little bit more access to the purse, I like to say. But then there's the doers, those that are actually getting the work done, the implementation functions, and they're all part of this big leadership team, okay? So what are we talking about for executive functions? Stakeholder support is who are you doing this for? Okay, so think about it. It's your school board, it's your parents, it's your community members. But your stakeholders are also your teachers, your administrators, and your kids. So when you think on a basic business model of consumer satisfaction, who are your consumers? Because those are the folks you want to be impacting and making a difference. They're the ones that sometimes help keep the funding going. All right, but then we also want to look at the policies and systems alignment. How can we get a little bit smarter in our organization, as well as impacting our workforce capacity? How many of you have had the opportunity within your districts to impact your human resources so that there's actually evaluation questions when you're hiring folks, or questions on evaluations on how folks know and how they're implementing Pbis? Do any of you have that? Good job. It's not a whole lot of hands, but we've got some hands. You are making an impact. That's, again, you're starting to pull folks that have some interest with that. But then those that are implementing, we've got those that are engaging in the training, coaching, as well as collecting the data, providing the feedback on how folks are doing, as well as the behavioral expertise. And from that, we get these model schools or local demonstrations. And you know those are the ones that helped continue to sell it for you if another school is dragging their feet, right? Or if you have a team that says, we don't need to do this, you take them and you have them go visit one of your demonstration sites. But that district at LEA is truly the key, and that team is going to be the key for how things go. So, typically, and you know what's scary is when I came across this, I went, wow, there's actually a lot of district meetings I've been to where they imprinted this. So we got to think about, we've got to get ready, we've got to get prepared in this process. There's district readiness checklists that need to be done possibly. What types of tasks do we need to get that district team ready before we even start talking about training schools? But then when we're ready to start talking about training schools, what's the task that schools need to get ready for? All right, and we do this all to prevent, let's see, did I skip something? I may not have. All right, let's talk about district readiness. How many of you in your state have some type of district readiness process established for your districts to use? Good. And how many of you for your districts have some type of district readiness process established for your schools? Or school readiness checklist for that, yeah. Okay, good. So you've got some pieces for that. So I'll explain this story to you, but this is Florida's district readiness checklist. All of this stuff's available on the Florida site. I know a lot of other states have some type of district readiness process, but there's a reason why we created this, and it's not because we love paperwork or we want to look formal or we've got some folks that are really good at creating forms and spreadsheets and stuff, but the reason is we were getting burned. We were working really hard at training folks, and they weren't sustaining. And we thought, what was the missing piece? What needed to change? We've also had developed readiness processes to get ready for that district leadership team meeting. Because how hard is it to get all of your district leaders in the same room at the same time for at least an hour? Yes. That's not specific to a state or a district, okay? That's just the nature of the beast. So we have got to be prepared. When we get them for that short amount of time, or portions of those folks, have we done our homework? And so what we've got is we call it the pre-YIP interview. YIP stands for Yearly Implementation Planning. You can call it whatever you want. But what we saw is that we had to engage in some great tasks with our key people to get ready for that meeting so that we had all of our homework done and we could present it to them so they could start getting to figuring out what's their vision going to be, what goals do we need to have, and what resources are we going to pull together to make that happen. District resource mapping. How many of you have engaged in that process? Great. And so this is the piece you want to look at. Your district has invested already, and hopefully all of them are evidence-based practices. But I've had some districts that they start to map it out, and there's over 150 things they come up with just for dealing with behavior and discipline. That's problematic. So when Rob says working smarter, are we truly working smarter when that's happening? No, there's no way we can help sustain that. So we've got to think about what's working and where are we going to invest. Here's another way of looking at the resource map. I think George or Susan Barrett may have developed this, but it's looking at what information do we have, what practices do we have or need, and then what systems do we have or need. Again, you're doing your homework so that you're ready to present that to the folks, because I guarantee when they're sitting around the table, they don't really know everything that other department's doing. We call that the silos, right? So think about, what is your team's vision? You've got, where are you going? Where's the process? Why are we doing this? Folks need to know what the vision is. Okay, they need to know what's going to help drive them, to keep them moving forward. This is something that I see that folks oftentimes don't spend time on, because they'll say, we've got a district vision mission already, and they'll go, what's the mission again? Okay, and then they'll run out and read the mural, somewhere at the front office. The key is, what's driving you guys? Because the mission was set by people that may not even be still alive in that district, okay? Doesn't mean it's a bad mission or a vision, but is it relevant to what's going on right now? And then what does it mean to you guys? Because it's got to mean something for you, because that's where you're going to put the energy into it to move forward. So systematic planning needs to occur. We've got to think about, what are our challenges and our needs? What are our strengths and resources that we have? And then when we think about data, what types of data we want to collect, think about what it is that you want to know. Do you want to know what extent your students are meeting the expectations? What's the performance of the growth expectations for academics, for behavior, and for the social emotional piece? That's going to help you determine what types of data you need to collect, which will then help you determine what you need to do to train and support in order to get those goals met to meet your vision. And that helps you then develop those goals. And you can start to see, as you're collecting data, your goals will get revised, things get adjusted. But you move up and down this process, and it's a continual improvement process. But planning can be messy. Okay, this is an actual picture after, this may have been state level. Georgia, are you in here? All right. Planning can be messy, but then things can get cleaned up. So this is Bermuda's plan. I'm quite aware that Bermuda is not a US territory, but I wanted to use Bermuda as an example because they started with Pbis and saw then we need to move into multi-tiered systems of support. But as they were moving towards MTSS, they realized we don't have any demonstrations in anything. For Pbis, for MTSS. MTSS sounds like a great thing, it makes more sense, but we don't even have demonstrations of how our teams are doing well and looking at our data academically. But our behaviors are out of control. So they committed, we are going to get Pbis underway, and then we'll start to expand and bring in how we're looking at the academics and let the schools figure out what's the most efficient way for them to problem solve the issues around their kids, academic and behaviorally. But they had to set up kind of these rudimentary goals, like we will establish an evaluation system. But as folks start to get more, and I'm using Bermuda also as an example, because there's only 37 schools on the island, and there's only one district. So that's oftentimes a lot of the sizes of our districts. Not necessarily Florida districts, but this is Georgia's draft. So then Georgia changed. It's like they only have 3 goals. Oh my gosh, are they not doing much? No, they used to have like 5 or 7 goals too. But once you get your evaluation system set up, you don't need a goal on, we're going to evaluate, right? No, evaluation is embedded and integrated throughout each of those content areas that you're focusing on. So they moved into the mental health aspect of it. That was a big content area goal, but evaluation's embedded within, so it's no longer a standalone, we're getting rid of and starting to dismantle silos. This is an actual schools plan, where the school sat down and talked about what's currently happening, who's at our table that we need to enroll for our stakeholders, what do we want to do, what are our strengths, and then what are our goals, and who's responsible for that. So no matter what, there needs to be planning that occurs. So you've got to have these clear, from this meeting, hopefully some clear district expectations will come up. And from this, these district expectations can be communicated so that there's a common messaging that's occurring across your district and that that's trickled down to the school. Otherwise, people will say, what's this initiative? How long do you think it's going to last? Right? Or I remember when they tried something like this 10 years ago, right? Oh, we know from the research this works. So what are we going to do to implement it and make sure we get those same outcomes that the research shows? So just then, once the district figures out their stuff, then we can talk about getting schools ready for training. It's not about PD only. It's not about, hey, I got these 5 schools, they want to get trained, let's get going. This is why we created this stuff, because we were burned. In 2001 or 2002, we had trained a bunch of schools in Florida. It was the first big kickoff. Most of them were in the Panhandle. Great beaches, Emerald Isle, awesome place to visit, not during spring break, but it's a difficult place to get to from Tampa. And the next year, only 25% of all of our schools we trained the year before were still implementing. Anybody want to guess what happened? It was not a hurricane year. Reading First was launched in the state. Reading's bad, PBIS is good. No. So, no fault of the schools, the district said, this is a priority. You're going to focus on reading first, and this is all that you're going to do. And the districts had to do it. It was no fault, or the schools had to do it. It was no fault of the schools. So I sat there, I'm like, where did we go wrong? Because I'm at home, I'm on bed rest, pregnant, week after week, before the days of Wi-Fi in the house, before the days of smartphones, and it gets pretty boring and it gives you a lot of time to think. And I perseverated on that year, like we spent a lot of time, money, resources of folks, schools day after day and coaching, working hard, and then they're not given the supports to continue. That's messed up. And I was mad. I was mad too. I had to be inside for so many days. But it got me thinking, we need to have some pieces in place. And I thought, I've got to blame somebody. So I was all about to blame Don. I thought, this is perfect. I'm going to blame Don Kincaid, my colleague. But I couldn't, because the issue was we didn't have these deep conversations with the districts. We had conversations with them, but it was, hey, do you have any schools that want to come to training? We'll train them for free. And in fact, we'll pay them to come to training. We'll give you all the training materials and we'll support them throughout the year. Do you have a location that we can do it? What are the dates? That's all we did. Because we had no idea. You had to dive deeper. And again, we're going back almost 20 years. You had to dive deeper and get into how does this fit with our district strategic plan? What resources are you going to put into place to help the school sustain? Do you understand what the schools are getting ready to engage in? How are you going to support them? It doesn't mean you have to commit to going district-wide with all your schools, but it means the schools that want to make a difference, how are you going to support them? And we didn't do that. And that became the creation of district readiness checklists, school readiness checklists, because also we would have folks come to show up to training and they would say, I don't know why I'm here, but I was just told to be here. Any of you had that before? Yeah, you don't tend to get as much done during that training. So we've got to get folks prepped and primed and ready so that they can get going at that training and start to make those planning changes right there. So we've got all kinds of forms now. And we're not doing it because we love forms. Again, we're doing it because we want to prevent people from having to get retrained or having their morale killed. They go to an exciting training, they're excited to make changes, and they get back to their school and they realize their school, they're not going to get any support and be able to start. That's a morale killer. All right, so here's the state of Florida. Areas that are coded in green mean they are active with us. So a school cannot call us up and say, I want to get trained. I'll say, well, you need to find someone in your district, and they need to organize a district leadership team. I got really good at saying no to folks. Say, no, I'm not going to train this individual school. No fault of yours, great for you that you want to do this, but you need to have the commitment from your district that you're going to be supported after this. So we only have 5 districts that are not working with us in the entire state, and that's the whole reason why I moved to Florida. It's 67 counties and 67 school districts. Easy math. You know, you go to other places like Pennsylvania, Texas, whatever, there's probably what? Thousands and thousands of districts. So we only have 5 that are not working with us, and of those 5, only 3 have actually never, ever contacted us. The other 2 folks died off, and then things really did stop. But we've got a range of folks and the range of schools that are implementing, and it means we have active district leadership teams in majority of the state that are working towards Pbis or their MTSS and supporting their schools going through this. But no one's exempt from this process, because just because we've got almost 2,000 schools across the state, I want to make sure it lasts. I want to make sure that folks are assessing what they're doing, they're getting the impact that they want. So, some of the questions I want you to think that you can ask. If you're coming from that school level, you can certainly apply these questions to your school. If you're coming from the district or state, these also work. But did we perform the activities and generate the desired outcomes within the time frame we said? Remember, this goes back to those planning pieces. Was our approach effective at building implementation capacity with fidelity and sustainability? Did our approach result in valued outcomes? Basically, did we make a difference, and do people see that it's valuable? And then do our stakeholders view our products or our services that we create as useful and high quality? If they don't, it's going to be hard to get funding. It's going to be hard to sustain your efforts. So this led to, we need to create some type of a process, a model, evaluation process for our state, because we need to get really clear in what we're doing. So we've got across all of our schools pulling the information together that the average school, or majority of our schools, I think it's about 74% of our schools, are implementing with high fidelity. And high fidelity is getting at least a 70 or higher on the benchmarks of quality. We're also looking at the advanced tiers as well. But you want to also look at, are you making a difference? If you implement with high fidelity, do you realize better student outcomes? And so one of the things I was tired of is that administrators were saying, hey, I don't have to do this. I'm happy just doing part of it. But what we found is that you have an average of 37% less office discipline referrals if you implement with high fidelity, and 46% less out-of-school suspensions if you implement with high fidelity. Think about the amount of time that you regain in that process for instruction. So, what we created was this overall model. And so what I want you to think about is, what are the data that you're using? Because what are the answers that you want to have solved? That will then help you determine what your evaluation process would look like, which is essentially your timelines. That helps you determine then, okay, on what we want to evaluate and impact, that's what we need to train and provide support on. That's your services piece. And based on what you're training and providing support on, are going to help you determine how you're going to get your folks ready. And then from there, you figure out what products and services that you want to provide. It could be as simple as the marquee at your school. It could be your district website. It could be some districts have newsletters. But what is that information? Because that's going to keep your stakeholders at the table and interested. So one of the things we realized is that what is it that makes some districts more successful than others? And so we recently had published an article. For several years, we've been examining districts, and we had 33 districts we wanted to identify high-performing districts within the state of Florida. And we had some criteria. And so they had to have at least 80% of their schools reporting the fidelity data across at least 80% of the years from the first time they were trained. But then we also wanted to know, are they having an impact on their student outcomes as well and not exceeding at least 15% in their office discipline referrals and out-of-school suspension. This was the quantitative piece to see which of our districts actually were eligible to be examined further. We had 33 districts that fit the profile of being able to look at their data. However, of those 33 districts, only 6 districts qualified for the criteria. So we went in and did some semi-structured interviews with them, and I'm not a qualitative person, it was really painful. But of this process, there's some things we found out. District coordinator is key. Coaching is key. District teaming, district team activities, leadership buy-in and support. District data infrastructure had to be established. Direct supports provided to schools, and there's communication. So let me go through really quickly what this means. All related to the blueprint, all crossed over with the blueprint, but what we found is it dove a little bit deeper in some of that stuff that's difficult to measure, such as district coordinator. What we found is it's not just the lead contact, but this person has interpersonal relationships. They're respected. They're passionate about this. They have the knowledge of Pbis. Those are things that are sometimes a little difficult to measure. So the takeaway are going to be in the blue arrows that I go through, because I'm going to go through this quickly. But essentially we found these personal attributes of the person who is your spokesmodel in your district is a key to successful implementation. This was the #1 factor that came up across the districts over and over again. Coaching. It's not just setting up coaches. It's not just having coaching meetings. But your coaches, they are your change piece. These are the coaches from Puerto Rico. Todos somos el cambio. We are the change. And they sent this to me on a Saturday night because they're not allowed to miss school days for training. Okay? Coaching is the change, but it's not just coaching is happening in the schools. Your coaches need to be trained. They need the skills. They need to be supported. They need to be coached in this process. So we've got to look at there's effective professional development for coaches. So what is that professional development? What is the model? Florida bases it around this problem-solving process. So think about what's the content you're providing to your coaches to build their skills, and then who are those people that are going to receive the content, but at some point are actually going to be delivering the content out to those schools. Okay, that was the #2 most important. Ways that we provide district-level coaching. We want folks to understand just because we're working with that district-level team, as a state, we're coaching those districts, but those district teams are coaching the rest of the schools, essentially out there. So there's a lot of material that's available on the Florida website as an example for district-level coaching. I think I'm walking too far away. District teaming. There's a range of stakeholders that are coming together and meeting and have specific activities in this process. And that they are aligning their practices with other things that are happening within their campuses or across their district. We found when they started to integrate MTSS without the expense of pushing Pbis to the side, they did much better. So there's multi-way partnerships that are focused on practices and outcomes. That's the way of work. Not it's a new way when we're practicing it. This is what we do. So there's all kinds of what are the strategies that you've got set up within your teams? What are the expectations? What are you conveying to those district leaders so that they're clear on what their expectations are? District team activities, there's ongoing action planning that's occurring. They're communicating with all of the stakeholders, and they are looking at that data and progress monitoring. So I think it's important, setting high expectations and providing follow-through after meetings and supporting them in that process makes a difference. Remember, no one's exempt. We expect the schools to do this, we expect the kids to do this, but you know what? Our district leaders, we're the model for our schools. All right, leadership and buy-in support, that it's critical for successful implementation of innovations. Where's that Georgia team? It's the George team with the governor, in case you didn't know. That's usually not somebody just down the hall that has a big desk like that, but thinking about what's that process of leadership development, highlighting the role of institutional knowledge. So people that get into that leadership role, they have that institutional knowledge of not only what's supposed to be happening in that direct area, but they understand the PBIS process and can help bring those together to say, this is how PBIS is going to work best for us based upon our needs. But it's an important strategy into making sure that we are having folks that know what they're doing with PBIS and being good communicators in that. District data infrastructure. So there needs to be some type of process and multiple layers involved in establishing an effective district infrastructure. We found bringing the IT folks to the meeting, even though they do speak a different language, that it's important to have them there so they can truly understand why you need data a certain way. There's direct support to schools that's provided. So the schools have got to have access to meaningful data in order to appropriately allocate the district resources. That's hugely important. Number 7, big theme. And the final, number 8, top theme was communication. What are you communicating? What is your common messaging? Because remember, common messaging is going to change your common practices, which is then going to change the common day-to-day experience happening out there in your district. So how are you communicating across the board? What's the message with it? Is this look like this is an important piece of your district process? So carefully plan those priorities and your method of communication across all your stakeholders. So we've pulled everything together into one nice little sheet that's only a couple pages long. It's completely aligned with the implementation blueprint that we've got as well, but sometimes folks get a little scared by how thick it is, but don't let that scare you. It's all great information. The takeaway is establish that bi-directional, content-rich coaching framework. Okay, remember, districts, you've got to be coached from others. And if you don't have active support from your state project or because there isn't things happening in your state, you need to pair up with another district. There's those networks that I talked to you about this morning. There's a lot of resources on the pbis.org site. There's a lot of resources on your other state sites that might be completely surrounding your state. So we've got to think about how we're using this, engaging in effective problem solving, and communicating across all. But nobody is exempt, so just remember that. It's not just, these kids, they won't behave. Because the minute you do that, you got to turn it this way. These adults, remember that, nobody is exempt. So it doesn't matter. If we want the kids to change, we are going to have to change first. Okay? If we want the schools to change as leaders, as school leaders to your classrooms, you guys are going to need to work together and change to model that. And states, you guys are going to have to work to be the model to the districts. And districts, you're going to have to be the model to your schools. Not saying it's going to be easy, but we've got to work together on this. So when we say there needs to be school-wide expectations, there should be district expectations. And states should be clear what they're expecting and what they're planning to do and deliver to support their districts and schools across their state. So nobody's exempt. And so that's that piece. I want you to truly understand what that means, okay? Because it means nobody's left out. So when we're talking about we're engaging in Tier 1 PBIS, that means all kids have access to Tier 1 PBIS. It's not just kids without disabilities or not kids that just decide to display the expectations. No, everybody is going to receive support. So all means all. All right? So hopefully the information that I shared with you guys, like I said, all of the links were provided on there for the national site or the Florida site. So if you wanted to go back, you can be able to get them pretty readily. But I vow to you in the next 5 years, I will not grow a beard to try to look like Tim or Kent whatsoever. I don't know about Brandy, but we won't do that. But we could not have done this without you, okay? You need to know we learn from you, you may learn from us, but we're all learning together in this process. This is a big collaborative effort. So thank you to everybody. Enjoy the next 2 days, and let's keep plugging on.